Hey, this is Coach Anderson from MPB Online. We're going to talk a little bit today about U.S. history selling the American West from 1860 to 1900. United States westward expansion starting around 1859, and we look at that period up until around 1900. We're going to look at this focus question. Throughout every lesson that we'll have in U.S. history this year, what we will do is look at a focus question for each individual unit. In this particular unit, the question we want to talk or keep in our mind as we go through it is, why would people take on the challenges of moving to the American West? First, we're going to start with the do now activity. And in this particular do now activity, what we want you to do is to take out your journal. And what we want you to do with that journal is write down the following question. What challenges might you face if you were moving from your current home to somewhere else? Think about that for a few seconds. Take a few moments, put some pen to paper, think about why people, and why would anybody leave their comfortable home and go to a place, of course, that was wild, was untamed. You had to face Native Americans, of course, that didn't want you there. Grizzly bears and all kind of other, environmental factors, of course, that were very, very difficult, of course, to encounter. So think about it. What challenges might you face if you were moving from your current home to somewhere else? Now think about your situation, and then think about those American settlers, of course, that were moving to those unknowns. And your situation is a little bit better than theirs. So take a few moments, write down that particular journal topic, and give us what your thoughts are. Okay, you should have had an opportunity to think about that a few seconds. If you were moving to a new place, there would be different things, of course, that you would have to be, aware of. You had to think about, what grocery stores you were going to go to. You have to think about what school you were going to have to go to. You have to think about, where the nearest movie theater was, where you were going to, any place, of course. Anything, of course, that would give you the same modern conveniences, of course, of where you are now. But think about it in terms of looking at people that were moving to the American West. They went from unknown circumstances and unknown situations to places that danger was around every corner. So when you think, as we go through and talk about these people and then the challenges, of course, that they take up, think about, the things that they had to go through in terms of those decisions that they made. Vocabulary. Throughout this particular lesson, there will be some vocabulary terms, of course, that we will point out to you. The first one is extract, the Vigilance Committee, and you don't think you know what a Vigilance Committee is, but I bet you by the time that we finish, everybody in here watching this particular lesson will know what a Vigilance Committee is, and then what hydraulic mining is. Guided reading activity. As we go through this individual unit, we want you to think about this question. How did mineral discoveries shape the settlement of the West? Now, what minerals are we talking about? We're talking about gold, we're talking about silver. Silver and gold, silver and gold. And that's what most people, of course, were looking for when they went to the American West. And if you threw in a little adventure, all the better. Here's a video that we have, a brief video on Manifest Destiny. And Manifest Destiny was this idea that started in back as far as the 1840s. And what they were talking about was the idea of the United States of America stretching from coast to coast. And there'll be a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of different things that'll go into this particular thought process. And we will find that by 1869, I believe, by 1869, we'll find that that promise, of course, will be realized. Why would people move? Well, think about it for a few seconds. The whole idea that we've been talking about today is about movement. Why people would move out of their comfortable homes and move to places, of course, that were wild and rugged and unknown. Well, think about it for a second. There are two categories of the way people think when it talks about movement. The first is what we call push factors. Push factors are those factors where you live that cause you to want to be somewhere else. And then pull factors are those factors where some other place is that draws you there? And in looking at those push factors, one of the things could be persecution. It could be religious persecution. It could be political persecution. It could be anything, that would cause you, of course, to feel, apprehensive about where you live. Looking at land, well, one of the things that this country had in great abundance in the post-Civil War period in 1865 was land, free land, and all you had to do was a few little things in the Homestead Act, of course, to qualify. Freedom. There were a lot of people that wanted to leave, their current circumstances so that they can move and come to this country so that they can experience freedom, of course, that they didn't have when they were living in Ireland, when they were living in Serbia, when they were living in Germany, so different places throughout Europe. One of the other reasons why, in terms of the push factor, was overpopulation. America's cities were just beginning to industrialize, and because of that industrialization, we saw that the populations of places like Chicago and New York, by 1900, had reached over 2 million people respectively. So in looking at the overcrowding that was starting to happen in American cities, there was another reason why people, of course, were motivated, of course, to leave their homes and move to the American West. The next thing we want to look at, of course, are pull factors. Now, the pull factor is a lot more attractive, if you will, than some of the push factors. In terms of looking at the pull factors, one of the things that the American West offered, of course, was gold. And it was gold in abundance, or at least so they thought. In terms of looking at gold, and more gold, those were very, very important things. One of the things that I neglected to put up there was God. It could have been one of the other G's, because when you look at the Mormons, a lot of the Mormons, of course, moved to Salt Lake, the Salt Lake area, of course, in terms of looking at Utah. So God, in some cases, of course, was one of the motivating factors. Glory. There were people, of course, that liked the idea of having that pioneer spirit, of going out and making their fortunes, or experiencing what they thought was the last American frontier. Gold strikes. There's gold in their heels. Sutter's Mill was a gold strike in 1850 right outside of Sacramento. Silver City in Idaho in 1859. Virginia City and Carson City in Nevada in 1864. Pikes Peak in 1876 in Colorado. Helena in 1889 in Montana, Helena, excuse me. And then Deadwood in 1889 South Dakota. Idaho City, Idaho's gold strike, and then Tombstone was a silver strike in 1912. And Tombstone, of course, is one of those places that we've heard a little bit about. If you remember, we'll talk about in a few minutes, that famous gunfight at the Battle of the OK Corral. And looking at some of the areas that we're talking about, in terms of where the population, of course, went to, if you look here, what you'll see, of course, is some very rocky terrain. It doesn't come across very well on the map, but when we're looking at this area throughout the United States of America, we're talking about the Rocky Mountain region. So not only did these people, of course, have all those other factors that they have to kind of watch out for in terms of bears and weather and things like that, they also had to deal with the terrain. And those are the gold and silver strikes. Mining leads to statehood. Because of the influx of people, of course, that came to the American West, there were 5 or 6 states, of course, that were created. And in looking at those states, in 1889, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana. In 1912, by 1912, we had Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona, and Wyoming. And these places, of course, would make up the heart of America's Great Plains region. Boom towns. If you went to America's boom towns at this time, what you would see, of course, is a couple of things that you would see. More than likely, you would see a rooming house. You would see a saloon, a brothel or two. You would see muddy streets in most cases, and you would see some probably pretty bad things. It wasn't, a place, of course, for, I guess you could say it wasn't a PG kind of place. It was more of an R-rated kind of place than it was a PG place. Life in the boom towns. Lawlessness ran rampant. In these early mining boom towns, the quest for riches didn't always reach the gold fields. A lot of those riches, of course, they were made in the saloons, they were made in the brothels, it was made at the card tables. And one thing that we didn't have in a lot of these places, of course, was a lot of law enforcement. And then the law enforcement that we did have, in most cases, came in the form of vigilance committees. What we call a vigilance committee is what we call a posse, where if somebody, of course, did something, of course, that was wrong, what they would do is people would, get a posse together and they'd go out and capture the person. And a lot of the times when it came to justice, it usually came at the end of a rope, not in front of a judge. Here is Wyatt Earp. He's one of those notorious people that was involved in the battle at the OK Corral. A lot of people have glamorized him over the years, but he's just as flawed as anybody else that we've had in terms of looking at the people in the West. He's, in eyes of many, as much outlaw as he is hero. Here's John Henry Holliday. We call him Doc Holliday, of course, and he was Wyatt Earp's, right-hand man, and they were involved, of course, in the battle at the OK Corral. This is another video of the OK Corral shootout, and you can learn a whole lot about that particular video, that particular gunfight, if you go to this particular video on YouTube. At this time, if you'd like to go through and view it, go ahead and view that video and let us know what you think. Wild Bill Hickok. This is also one of those glamorized figures from the American West. Wild Bill Hickok was in Deadwood, South Dakota, and he, of course, was at the gold fields, and he was trying to make a fortune, of course, at the card table. He ends up getting killed, with the famous aces and eights hand, of course, that he's holding. So he, once again, one of those glamorized figures, but sometimes when we glamorize them, they're more outlaw than, of course, they are anything else. Advancement in mining technology. So how did these people make these particular, fortunes? Well, the first initial gold that was found was usually done by placer mining. And what placer mining usually involved was a pan, a pick, a shovel, an axe, and some water, of course, where an individual prospector would go and pan for gold. When it came to hydraulic mining, it was a little bit different. That's when, more or less, when the big businesses start taking over the mining companies, taking over and creating these mining companies. When all the loose gold was found, what they would do, of course, is use these water cannons. And what these water cannons would do, this is a picture of placer mining, and this is a picture of hydraulic mining. And the only thing about the hydraulic mining is that they would use these high-pressure hoses to extract the minerals, but what would happen inevitably is that it would cause a lot of damage, of course, to the landscape, to the western landscapes. Changes to the land. Placer mining was relatively low impact on the land because of the scale and the types of instruments used. Hydraulic mining drastically changed the landscape by flooding, and then early regulation by the federal government placed restrictions on hydraulic mining a little bit later after they started to see the damage, of course, that was being done to the American landscape. Now, if you remember when we started, we talked about this guided reading activity. We want you to think about this particular question as we talk to you today about those various things regarding this lesson. The question was, how did mining discovery shape the settlement of the West? And we'll give you a minute, of course, to create your own answer about that, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss in a few moments. Okay, how did mineral discovery shape the settlement of the West? Well, they created boom towns. Population increased because of the migration, with creation of territories that would later, of course, become states. And if you remember, I think we had about 7 or 8 states that we talked about that were created, like Wyoming, of course, Colorado, and then Arizona. And then we talked about, the frontier lawlessness, and we talked about the creation of the vigilantes and the posses, and then the changes in the American Western landscape because of that mining, particularly that hydraulic mining. Here are a few questions that if you are interested, and you should be, because these are the types of questions that you're going to see, of course, in the map test. The discoveries of gold at Sutter's Creek, California in 1848, the discovery of gold at Pikes Peak, Colorado, and the discovery of silver at Carson River, Colorado, had which effect on the development of the American West? A, thousands of people migrated to western boom towns. B, the West became the center of American banking. C, rail construction was delayed because people started prospecting. Or D, prospectors turned to coal mining when the gold and silver ran out. I'll give you a few seconds, think about that. The answer is thousands of people migrated to western boom towns. I hope you've learned a little bit of something about the American West and why people, of course, moved to the American West. Please go back, do your own research. Don't take one man's account, of course, in terms of what happens. Your ideas about Wild Bill Hickok and Wyatt Earp may be a little bit different from mine. So go through, do your own research, and come up with your own decisions about those particular people. Thank you. Have a great day.